Mike, I noticed the clock is ticking on Kirk Cousins and the Washington Redskins. And what happens if they don't get a long-term deal done? What is the time frame for this, and what happens if they don't get a long-term deal done?
Well, the deadline, Dan, 4 p.m. Eastern, Monday, the 17th of July. After that, Cousins will be and remain. He's already under contract for 2017. No long-term deal can be negotiated until after the regular season ends. And then after the regular season, Washington would have a window of exclusive negotiating rights with Cousins. But the reality is, next year it gets even more expensive. It would either be $34 million plus under the franchise tag for a third year, $28 million plus under the transition tag, which would still let Cousins go out and try to find someone to sign into an offer sheet. Washington would have a right to match it with no compensation if they choose not to, or hit the open market. And how often have we seen a healthy franchise quarterback hit the open market? It typically doesn't happen. We may have two of them next year because Drew Brees, even though he's going to be 39, franchise quarterback, the way things are set up in New Orleans, he could be headed for the open market. Cousins could be headed for the open market. But if this thing doesn't get done by Monday at 4, that's the scenario next year. And it's one of the reasons why Cousins' agent is driving such a hard bargain. Cousins holds all the cards in this one, and every bet that's been placed so far has worked out in his favor.
How would you describe this relationship between Cousins and the Redskins?
Well, I mean, it's strange, Dan. They use the franchise tag on him twice, but they don't want to pay him like a franchise quarterback. And more specifically, they don't want to pay him in accordance with what his circumstances would dictate, right? They could have gotten him for a much cheaper deal during the 2015 season once they realized that he's the guy and Robert Griffin III isn't. Then after the season ended and they applied the franchise tag, they didn't want to pay him a contract based on what $19.95 million cash in hand for 2016 would have dictated. It's a very easy formula once you know what a guy's franchise tag salary is. So they wait a year, they use the tag again. It all gets more expensive this year because they're starting at $23.94 million for 2017. Next year it gets even more expensive. I mean, at some point, they just have to admit they screwed up. They have to admit that this is the guy we want over the long haul, and they have to pay him in accordance with his specific circumstances. Every quarterback's different, and Washington has not, three straight times now, been willing to pay Cousins in accordance with what his circumstances would suggest, and we'll find out by next Monday whether or not they change their mind and do it now.
Well, this also comes to mind. If I'm Kirk Cousins, do I want to be with an organization that's not smart enough to understand that I am their franchise quarterback?
Well, you know, last week Jason Campbell was quoted as saying that during his time as the Washington starter, there was a whole lot of crazy going on, and Cousins has been privy to whatever crazy's been going on in Washington. And if you don't feel wanted, don't we all want to feel wanted and appreciated in our jobs? And, yeah, I mean, hey, he's getting paid $23 million this year. I mean, that's a whole lot of we want this guy, but they haven't made that long-term commitment. Leadership's so important for quarterbacks. How hard is it for Cousins to lead a locker room when he's on a year-to-year arrangement and the team hasn't given him that long-term deal? And, Dan, if this plays out and he hits the open market, a lot of people assume he makes a beeline for San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan, but what about Sean McVay and the Rams? What if Sean McVay decides that Jared Goff isn't the guy that Sean McVay inherited when he took that job? I mean, McVay's the head coach of the Rams because of Kirk Cousins to a certain extent. And so what if McVay and Shanahan get into a tug-of-war next year in the same division for Cousins? It could be fascinating the way this plays out if Washington doesn't do the deal by Monday. And most people right now think that Washington isn't going to have the epiphany they need to have to pay Cousins the money that his circumstances suggest he should get.
What's the Le'Veon Bell situation with the Steelers?
Well, I mean, Bell's not under contract, right? So he skipped the offseason program. He's got a $12.1 million franchise salary for 2017, which is well above the running back market. Right now, LaShawn McCoy is the highest-paid running back on a multi-year deal at $8 million. So here's Bell at 12.1. So how do you negotiate a long-term deal? Well, for a franchise player, you take the 12.1 cash in hand, you multiply it by 1.2 to reflect the 20% raise for what he would get next year under the tag, and that's the starting point. So it's like $25 million over 2 years for Le'Veon Bell. Well, who's going to give that kind of a money to a running back, especially with a history of injury and a history of substance abuse suspensions? So I think the Steelers are content to go just for this year and then make a decision next year what they're going to do with Bell. But, you know, until Bell signs his franchise tender, He's not under contract. He could hold out a training camp. He could skip the preseason. He could show up like 4 days before the start of the regular season and still get the $12.1 million. And are the Steelers comfortable with that, with their running back being not a part of the team at all until right before the start of the regular season? If Bell does that, he has the power to do it under the franchise tag, and the Steelers have the power to rescind it. And, I'm not saying they're going to do it, but you have to at least keep an eye on the possibility that the Steelers get on the brink of the regular season. If Bell doesn't show up, let's say they're happy with James Conner, the rookie from Pitt. They're happy with the other guys they have who are all making a hell of a lot less than $12.1 million this year. They could rescind that tender and throw Bell out into the open market, and no one's going to pay him $12 million in late August, early September when they already have their teams ready to go.
Talking to Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. Let me circle back to what you were talking about with Drew Brees, that he's not going to have, this is it. This might be it in New Orleans. Is that the distinct possibility that, and it doesn't seem like Brees is slowing down. So is Drew Brees going to play elsewhere next year?
Well, he always says he's committed to the Saints, but what happened last year, he was entering the final year of his contract. He did a one-year deal, one-year extension, and then he has said he's not going to do another extension. This contract's going to expire, and there's a term in there that they can't use the franchise tag, regardless of whether they would or wouldn't. He's going to hit the open market unless he and the Saints work out a new deal by next March when the league year begins. And I think I think at some level, I think he means a lot to New Orleans, and New Orleans means a lot to him. But at some level, he wants to sit back and have control over what happens next year, over what happens over the final years of his career. I mean, what if Sean, every year there's a rumor Sean Payton's going to leave the Saints. What if this is the year that Sean Payton finally leaves? That's going to be a factor for Drew Brees, especially if Sean Payton wants Drew Brees to be his quarterback wherever Sean Payton may end up. So, Brees is in a situation where he's going to call the shots on this one. And, yeah, he'll be 39 in January, but we marvel all the time at Tom Brady as he gets closer to 40 that he hasn't lost anything. Well, Brees hasn't lost anything either.
How's this going over with NFL players, these contracts that we're seeing, certainly with the NBA? The amount of money, the whole guaranteed contracts thing that players have complained about for decades. Can you see this being brought up next go-round?
Well, here's the thing. Next go-round, if the players want to have more money individually, they need more money collectively, Dan, and the way to get more money collectively is to get a better deal. And at some point, to get the best deal that you can get through labor negotiations, you have to be willing to press the nuclear button like the owners did 6 years ago when they locked the players out and were ready to lock them out into the regular season. The players, though, aren't regarded as being willing to miss game checks. They aren't being regarded as willing to miss football games. And what are they going to do without revenue? So the strike option seemed to fizzle and die in 1987 when the strike failed that year, and they actually ended up getting a much better collective bargaining agreement through the court system after that. So, we're back at the point where if they want to get paid more money, they're going to need to be willing to walk away. And the question is, are they willing to? And we're talking about 2021, Dan. Guys who are going to be making the decision whether or not they're going to strike, most of them are still in college, and some of them are in high school. Yeah. So who knows how this is going to go? But and the thing on guaranteed contracts, if the NFL adopted fully guaranteed contracts right now, I guarantee you that 99.9% of all contracts would be 2 or 3 years maximum, because teams wouldn't want to commit guaranteed money beyond that. And that would be good for the players too. Hey, we'll go right back to the market in 2 or 3 years instead of being stuck on the back end of a contract that's more favorable to the team than me. But that would be the practical outcome. We would have guys changing teams a lot more often than they already are.
I see what you did. You guaranteed the guaranteed contract thing. So
I don't know. I make no guarantees. I don't. I've learned from what's that Twitter account, Old Tate's Exposed. I no longer take a hard line on anything.
All right.
No predictions.
Well,
no promises.
Okay, but I'm going to ask you. I'm going to leave you with this. You can have Dak Prescott or Carson Wentz going forward.
Oh man. I can't. Between the two, I would probably lean Carson Wentz because I think he did more with a lot less last year than what Prescott did with the best offensive line in football and Ezekiel Elliott, and a defense that was a lot better last year than it's going to be this year.
What if Dak Prescott was taken number 2 overall and Carson Wentz went in the 4th round?
Oh wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. That would probably influence me to say Dak Prescott. I'll be honest with you. Not that I'm ever dishonest with you. I'll be candid with you. They teach you that in law school. Don't say to be honest with you, because that implies that you're otherwise not honest. I'll be candid with you and say that would be a factor for me because somebody thought enough of him to make him the second overall pick in the draft.
Do they teach you how to lie in law school?
No, they teach you how to tell the truth persuasively. They don't teach you how to lie. What they teach you how to do, Dan, more important than anything other that they teach you, and this has served me well in this business, they teach you how to spot when someone is lying to you.
All right, give me a couple of tells.
Oh, apart from inconsistencies, logical inconsistencies in the thing people say. I mean, the all-time tell is I learned this from Seinfeld: the touch of the face, and the higher you touch on the face, the bigger the lie. And it's true. When I'm interviewing people and they go to the face,
when they scratch their head, when you scratch
the head, scratch the nose, scratch the cheek. Anytime there's a pause and you go to the face, it's a lie. Guaranteed. I'll guarantee that one.
I'm going to keep an eye on my guys in here.
Just make sure. And here's the thing: what a strange coincidence if you actually have an itch on your face, and it's not it's not just a tell. Your face actually itches because you've got a skin condition.
Let me try this right now, Mike. Paulie, were there things that were sent to the man cave addressed to me, and they're somehow in your possession at home?
I see.
You just put your hand to your face. Yeah. You're right.
I'm
now he's scratching his head.
2 hands.
Both hands. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us. Enjoy your time off.
All right, see you, pal.
All right, Mike Florio.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.